Well, glad to be here today and be able to present to you all. Um, you're going to see a lot of emerging technologies around biologic-based treatments. Brian referred to one of them today, which is generally within the gene therapy realm. But there's a lot of ones that are coming out. I'll go over basically the major ones, and then I'll jump into the specific little area that we have which is of exosomes, which is kind of the next generation of stem cell therapies. So I'll present for about 15 minutes and leave some time left over at the end for questions. And I'm the president of Exostem. So if you take a look at pharmaceutical versus biologics, I realize in the audience today we have some people that are very well versed in medicine. That we've got some nurses, some doctors, some researchers that are very well versed in this. Some others that are this will be some new information for you. So I'm going to take this more towards the people where it's new information for you, and then maybe at the end, for those of you that are in the more therapeutic realms of medicine, we'll open it up for questions as well too. So you'll see out there pharmaceutical versus these biologic therapies. What's the difference? Well, pharmaceutical drugs, which have been kind of the mainstay for therapies for decades, are usually a single synthesized molecule. And since it's just one molecule, the mechanism of action is very well defined. It will block this marker. It will for a receptor on a cell, it will block this. Then the cascading biological effects are very well documented. The molecules are not native to our body. Typically, they usually come from either from plants or from the earth, and then they're synthesized and made into just one molecule. So, but the problem is, whenever you get things that aren't native to our body, you can have things, you can have side effects, you can have overdosing, which can cause all kinds of problems. The efficacy, the adverse side effects, and the dosing are documented through clinical trials with the FDA. These typically if you take a look at preclinical through clinical trials at different phases, you're talking about probably a decade usually for that to happen. The problem is some adverse effects take years or decades to discover, particularly side effects. One of the concerns with the COVID vaccines is those have been tested for months, not years, and using a messenger RNA to move it around. As I talk with our scientists, they're very up on using that technology. But the question, particularly for kids, will be 10 years. Their bodies are growing, they're developing. What are these therapies that are only tested for, maybe less than a year under expanded access FDA guidelines? What will the effects be in a decade to some of these kids?
Right.
When you take a look at biologics, they're sourced from human cells or tissue, from either your own body or from someone else's body. But they're natural to the body, which means overdosing is typically not an issue. You could overdose by many times, and your body knows how to get rid of those enzymes or those proteins or whatever's being done. And then the second piece of that is that there's, when you take a look at a biologic, there's a bunch of components to it: proteins, messenger RNAs, microRNAs, cytokines, all kinds of stuff that are in these things. So the mechanism of action that's easy in a pharmaceutical is now much more complex because there's so much into them. It's not quite as simple. But overdosing is typically not an issue. And you'll see all kinds of therapies that are coming out now. PRP, stem cell therapies, gene therapies, microRNA, messenger RNAs, growth factors, cytokines, exosomes, all kinds of therapies that are developing. You're going to see more of over the next decade. You're going to see a lot more of these because there's a lot of developments on the biologic side.
Excuse me, Steve.
Yeah.
I don't think your slides are advancing.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they are. He covered the one there, so they're okay right now.
I apologize.
There we go.
Yeah. So what I'm going to cover today is exosomes, and exosomes are really the next generation of stem cell therapies. So it's basically with stem cells, they send these signals off. And there's these much smaller signals than the stem cells themselves. And it's telling other organs, other cells within the body to do things. The other thing stem cells can be is with pluripotent, which Brian, you touched on that a little earlier, as well as multipotent stem cells. They can become other types of cells, and through the culturing can do that. So with the big thing with exosomes is they're not cells. So when you're getting an exosome therapy, you're not getting someone else's cells, you're getting just these little tiny exosomes here. If you take a look at a picture of this, the exosomes are in kind of the nano range, nanometer, versus the stem cells are in the micron range. They're much larger. So the nice thing about that is based off the smaller size, it can get to places where the larger stem cells can't get to, particularly when we're talking about the blood-brain barrier in getting therapies to the blood-brain barrier. You'll hear in probably the next 2 or 3 years, the National Institute of Health is spending a lot of time and money on this, of liquid biopsies. So particularly for cancer, today when you get a biopsy, you've got to go in and you've got to, through surgery, take a snippet of that, take it out, and then that's analyzed for whether it's benign or whether it's malignant and what type of cancer it is. These exosomes that are sent from cells can be either positive things, which we're doing as a therapy, or they can be negative things like a cancer cell sending signals ahead of time and spreading the cancer. So with a liquid biopsy, what they're doing is they're taking a look at the markers of these exosomes, and they're taking a look at the payloads, what's inside of them, to determine what was the source of this. If it's a cancer cell, what's the type of cancer? What's maybe even the stage? And that's what a liquid biopsy is, and it's particularly useful for cancer, where these exosomes can go very easily through the blood-brain barrier. And for that, so you'll be hearing more about liquid biopsies. I'm guessing over the next probably 3 years or so, you'll hear a lot more about those. So you're not having to surgically remove something.
That'll be great.
Yeah, these exosomes are telling you what's going on, and there's a ton of money being put into that. So I've already covered this last part, that how small these are and how it's you can get to areas where you can't with stem cells. So with exosome therapies, kind of what does it do? What's it for? Where can it help? And up above here, I'll go through some of the ones that we're doing here at Exostem. But there's disorders for cancer, for gene therapy. Exosomes are very useful for gene therapy. For Lyme disease, for Parkinson's, for fibromyalgia, for regenerative medicine or anti-aging, and for a lot of neuroinflammatory diseases are the areas where exosomes over the next decade, you're going to see them being used very broad spread, similar to what we've seen with stem cell therapy, but there's a lot more that can be done with the exosomes. So what we're focusing on is type 1 diabetes. We have some possibilities for type 2, but if we try to do too many things, we can't do them all. So type 1 diabetes, where it's a biologic instead of injecting a stem cell, instead of injecting insulin. Brain injuries, we're focusing particularly on chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which I'll cover in a minute. That's kind of football players, NHL boxers, where their heads are getting bashed, not big concussions, but small ones, and what that does. Then the last one is multiple sclerosis, and we'll cover a little bit about that in what we can do with that. And basically with multiple sclerosis, that's the body attacked itself. T cells attack the sheath, the myelin sheath around nerves, and makes them so they can't function anymore. So these are the ones that we're working on that are kind of our more key therapies, and these will take a while to get to market. We're also doing kind of more minor ones, and with all these, we're using other partners to work with on these. We can't do all this ourselves. So for type 1 diabetes, we're working with the University of Florida, et cetera, et cetera. For arthritis and joints, we'll be doing those outside of the US. And we're looking at a couple countries in free medical zones where it's kind of a resort destinations for people to go to for therapies. And we're focusing particularly on arthritis and joints. We've also, with hair and with skin, we have a sister company, Celeste Regenerative Therapeutics, which will be distributing all of our exome therapies through them. But here's a phase 1 trial we done on hair. You can see we got pretty good regrowth of hair. We're moving to phase 2. We're going to be doing deeper clinical studies on this to see really the mode of action, how that's working. For skin regeneration, we've seen some very good results in phase 1 trials. We're ready to jump to phase 2 trials. But for hair and skin, the FDA doesn't regulate it. They got their hands full with lots of other stuff. So we've gotten clearances for them, but we don't have to go through the formal IND process for these, so we can move very rapidly. I'm expecting for all of these, we'll have products out to market in 2022.
Wow.
Here in other countries, for hair and skin, we're moving very rapidly. We're into phase 2 trials now, and we think we'll have products in 2022 for these. Okay, moving forward, I'll just take a look at a couple of these therapies. Can't cover them all, but I'll cover a couple of them. For type 1 diabetes, the way that insulin is controlled, it was first discovered the biologic effects between insulin and glucose about 100 years ago. And basically, it's through insulin injections. If you take a look at, this starts in kids. Type 1 diabetes used to be called juvenile diabetes, but people are getting it later in life now, so it's now called type 1 diabetes. But here's the number of injections. When you think this may be into a 2-year-old, that's a lot of injections. There's new devices out now where it can monitor and inject insulin, through a device. But many times type 1 diabetics have very fragile skin, so they can't use those. So there's multiple pathways to type 1 diabetes. We're taking a biologic approach, but there's also some really good movement in the device approach as well too. And hopefully between all this together, we'll come up with some good therapies. But basically, we're taking a biologic approach versus an injected insulin approach.
Excellent.
So basically what our product will do is no more injections, either through these devices or people having to just, if you're really controlling your blood glucose levels, you're doing tests probably 6 to 8 times a day. If you're not monitoring very well, you're doing maybe 1 or 2, and you're gonna have some problems later in life. So basically what we do is we encapsulate insulin into these, and basically what happens with type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease. T cells go into the islets that are on the pancreas and kill off these beta cells, which produce insulin. Not necessarily killing off the other cells, the alpha and other ones in there, but these islets, particularly the beta cells, get killed, and therefore your body doesn't produce insulin anymore. So, when this gets out of control, your blood glucose levels can get very high, and then that causes all the complications of diabetes that are very dreadful. With our device, we want to keep it so that the blood glucose levels are monitored as though what a natural pancreas, the islets within the pancreas would do. So what we have to do now is these beta cells, we microencapsulate them in an alginate and pectin-based cell, kind of a protection, to protect it against these same T cells that killed the beta producing cells in your body are going to attack our cells. So to make sure they're protected so they can be producing insulin, that they're receiving nutrients to continue to do this for a decade, and protect them so that the same autoimmune disease won't kill the cells that we're now putting into a body. So we encapsulate them in these small microencapsulations. Then that's put in with a device that's kind of subcutaneously put in your gut area. We're going to be bringing this to market for dogs first. And this product's going to take us 10 years to get to market. With all the things that the FDA will have to work with on that are it's needed in our industry to make sure this is truly effective and safe. It will take decades. There's a big market of this for dogs. There's a lot of people that come home during the middle of the day and give their dogs injections. So we'll be doing this in the dog market. We're working with the University of Florida with a veterinary training hospital on that. And we'll be doing that. We think we could have a product to market for that in 2023. And that'll help us also in producing data that we use for clinical purpose on the human side. So a lot that we're doing with the FDA on that one right now.
Excellent.
This next one, rather than talking about multiple sclerosis, I'm going to show you a really quick video here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reza Mohammadi, and right now we are in front of Sue and Bill Gross Hall Stem Cell Research Institute, which is one of the world's pioneering stem cell research centers. I received my PhD in material science and engineering, and my research was focused on using stem cell-derived products in treating autoimmune disorders, such as multiple sclerosis and type 1 diabetes. What you're about to see is some portion of my PhD research, which was focused on stem cell-derived exosomes in treating mouse model of multiple sclerosis. Our research on exosome therapy was focused on autoimmune and neurological disorders, and we particularly focused on multiple sclerosis. Both mice had MS symptoms. You can see the dramatic positive effects of exosome therapy on the mouse running circles versus the mouse laying still that received placebo control. When we saw these results, we got very excited. And for us, the question was, what is the next step? Then we met Dr. Sanderson and Exostem. And as a scientific advisory board of Exostem, we were hoping to translate this technology into clinics.
Okay, so rather than go into the details, I just want to show you, there's always a question when you're dealing with preclinical trials versus clinical trials of how well will a therapy that's done in animals. We start with rats and mice first, and then you go to larger animals, and then you go to your clinical trials. The question is always, with this kind of a model, how well will this translate into humans? But from some early testing we've seen, it could translate very well. So there's multiple sclerosis. There's other therapies coming out for MS. We also found some particular use for Parkinson's, but we can't do both diseases at once. We got to focus on one. But we think that will translate quite well into humans. Next one, I'll just cover this one. Then these are the only two therapies I can cover within the time I have. Nalini, how much more time do I have?
You've got another 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, easily, okay, good. So with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, it's brain injury. There's also traumatic brain injury, TBI, which is you're in a car wreck and you get really bashed up. CTE is more continuous beating of the head. Football players, hockey players, boxers, we've been seeing in soccer, it happened as well too. So we're focused on CTE. We're working with the University of Adelaide in Australia on our preclinical trials that we're doing right now. And basically, it's a degenerative brain disease caused by repetitive hits. It gets to be really bad as people age. So here's a normal brain. You can see it's well vascularized. You can't see any significant tau damage. Tau is a chemical that gets involved with this. Here's one with advanced CTE. It's very much like a dementia symptoms that you see, and the brain just shrinks. A lot of tau protein formation in this brain, and people can't function cognitively anymore. So that we're focused on CTE, and with the CTE, we're in the early study that was done in 2017. Out of 202 former NFL players, 99% were found to have CTE. And so we're working with the NFL Players Union, hockey. We're building an advocacy board now for CTE as well as doing our preclinical trials. So some interesting notes for those of you I can't cover all of our therapies, but hopefully get kind of a gist of what goes on with exomes. For some of you in the financial markets, an interesting thing that we did is all of our Series 1 and Series 2 funding has come from Canada. They're very interested in type 1 diabetes, particularly since they're the ones that first discovered insulin and its effects with glucose control. And we did it in the equivalent of a US Reg A kind of a format. We didn't want to get into the VCs, so we did it with the equivalent of US Reg A. And we're planning to, our first IPO will be on a Canadian stock exchange. We looked at Toronto Canadian, we're going public on Canadian, and we think we'll have everything ready for in August IPO. We're also creating a spin-off company on nanostrips. And there's so many things we're into. This is particularly for drug delivery. And with this, what we're doing is these strips, and you put them in your mouth just by your cheek. We've used nanoparticulation and encapsulation of the primary active we're trying to deliver in these. You put them in the side of your mouth. We've done some studies with some nursing homes as well as others. Our first product for this, we did some early work with CBD, which is very effective, but I just don't want to be in that market right now. So our first one will be with this use of these with curcumin, which is known in the regenerative medicine space as a good way. The nice thing about these is with this nanoparticulation and with this encapsulation, they go through the side of through the buccal layer, a side membrane in your mouth, go straight into your veins, and it goes to work without going through the stomach and the liver, which can significantly reduce the amount that goes to it. So we're doing some spin-offs where it's not really core to our technology, it's more delivery. We're doing other delivery mechanisms. So hopefully that gives you, I realize I've covered a lot. Hopefully that I'll open up for questions now.
Rocky.